It was a sunny afternoon in Maplewood, and the park was filled with children playing, families having picnics, and cyclists rushing by. However, in the shadow of one of the large trees, three friends gathered in a more isolated corner, away from the hustle and bustle. Ilara, with her light brown hair blowing in the wind and a sparkle in her eyes, was excited. Her hands gestured as she spoke, full of enthusiasm. "You won't believe the stories I've heard about the house at the end of Hawthorne Street. They say it's haunted, that horrible things have happened there." Finn, on the other hand, seemed less impressed. With his arms crossed and a skeptical expression, he shook his head. "Oh, Ilara, you believe everything you hear. It's just an old house. There's nothing supernatural about it. People make up these stories to scare children." His voice had a disdainful tone, but his words couldn't erase Ilara's excitement. Jasper, sitting between the two, looked at the grass with a dreamy expression. He had always been the most imaginative of the group, with an imagination that took him to distant places. "I think it would be an incredible adventure. Just imagine exploring a place that everyone fears. We could discover secrets or even find hidden treasures." He smiled, his eyes shining with the prospect of an exciting quest. Ilara quickly agreed, her eyes gleaming with the idea. "Yes, what if we found something like an old diary or objects that told the story of the family who lived there? We have to go, Finn. You can't just sit there being the skeptic. Let's do this." Her energy was contagious, and even Finn began to hesitate, the idea of adventure starting to seduce him. After some discussion, they decided they would go to the house. The walk there was marked by nervous laughter and comments about the legends surrounding the house. The mood was light, but as they approached the location, tension began to hang in the air. The old house stood before them, imposing and weathered by time. The broken windows looked like empty eyes watching them, and the door, a dark wooden stain, seemed to have been forgotten for decades. Ilara stopped in front of the entrance, her heart beating fast. "Look at this. It's even scarier than I imagined." Her voice was a whisper, as if she feared the house itself might hear them. Finn bit his lips, his expression denoting a mixture of skepticism and concern. "Maybe we should think this through better," he said, hesitating. But Jasper was so excited that he didn't pay attention to his friend's warning. Finally, with an encouraging push from Jasper, Ilara put her hand on the doorknob and pushed the door. It creaked, as if complaining about being opened after so long. A cold air enveloped her, making them all shudder. The interior of the house was a reflection of the exterior, dusty, dark, and filled with furniture covered by white sheets that looked like ghosts from a distant past. The friends hesitated on the threshold, the heavy and oppressive atmosphere making their hearts race. Each was wrapped in their own thoughts, Ilara full of curiosity, Finn fighting against the fear that was beginning to sprout inside him, and Jasper dreaming of the possibilities that place could offer. The silence was profound, interrupted only by the sound of the wind howling through the broken windows. They were about to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever, but for now, all they could do was observe the house that was observing them back. Inside the abandoned house, the atmosphere was heavy, and an unsettling silence dominated the environment. Ilara, Finn, and Jasper ventured into one of the rooms, whose walls were adorned with old photographs. The images, framed in dark wood and worn by time, showed a family that seemed happy. Wide smiles and affectionate gazes emanated from the photographs, a stark contrast to the decaying state of the house. Ilara approached one of the frames, her fingers delicately tracing the dusty outline of the image. "Look at them," she murmured, almost in a whisper, as if fearing to break the magic of that moment. "It seems they lived here a long time ago." Finn, on the other hand, shook his head, his skepticism manifesting as he observed the photos. "That's just an illusion, Ilara. These people aren't here anymore. It's just an old house full of dust and forgotten memories." His voice echoed through the room, breaking the enchanting serenity of the moment. Jasper, in his own world, stared fixedly at one of the photos, his mind traveling far away. He wondered about the dreams and hopes of that family, questioning how each of them might have felt living there, surrounded by those same walls that now seemed so oppressive. Meanwhile, Ilara moved away from the photographs, feeling a shiver run down her spine. The past, though distant, seemed to vibrate in the walls, and she couldn't avoid a sense of connection with those people. After all, everyone had their own fears, their insecurities. Sometimes she wondered if these memories still wandered through the house, trapped between the echoes of laughter and the shadows of time. This thin line between what was and what is intrigued her, but also terrified her. In a dark corner of the room, something caught Ilara's attention. It was a broken porcelain doll, its deep and sad eyes seeming almost alive. She crouched to pick up the doll, her heart racing. There was something deeply sad about that deteriorated figure, a strange beauty that attracted her. "Look at this," she said, lifting the doll for her friends to see. "It's so scary, but at the same time, I feel like it has a story." Finn frowned, his expression mixing skepticism and disdain. "You're really going to take that? It's just an old doll, Ilara. There's nothing special here, just another disposable object." Jasper, however, approached, his curiosity awakened. What if this doll has a meaning? Maybe someone loved it very much before all this happened. His eyes shone with the idea, but Finn just rolled his eyes. The tension between Finn and Jasper began to grow, and Ilara realized that the situation was becoming more delicate. "Come on, guys. We don't need to fight. We're here to explore, not to argue. The house is strange enough already." Finn hesitated, but his frustration was evident. "Explore, yes, but that doesn't mean we should get attached to worthless objects. We need to be rational." His voice was louder now, and Ilara could feel the heavy atmosphere forming between them. Jasper, noticing the growing tension, decided to intervene. "Maybe the doll has a tragic story, Finn. What if it belonged to a child who lived here? What happened to her?" The question hung in the air, loaded with a weight that seemed to echo on the walls of the room. Finn took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Look, I'm just saying we need to be cautious. This house isn't an amusement park. We need to focus on getting out of here." Ilara held the doll more firmly, feeling torn between the connection she felt with the object and the need to keep the friendship intact. "Let's continue exploring. Maybe we'll find more clues about what happened here." Her suggestion was met with a hesitant silence. The three friends looked at each other, each dealing with their own fears and insecurities, as they prepared to venture into another part of the house, not knowing that each step would lead them deeper into a labyrinth of emotions and dark secrets. Finn climbed the stairs with hesitant steps, his heart pounding in his chest. The attic, with its wooden boards creaking under his weight, seemed to call him to a secret that he wasn't sure he wanted to unravel. While Ilara and Jasper ventured on the floor below, he felt drawn to the solitude of the confined space. Light filtered weakly through the cracks in the roof, creating dancing shadows that seemed to whisper stories of a forgotten past. As soon as he reached the top, a wave of dust rose from the floor, making him cough. The environment was oppressive, loaded with warm, stagnant air that seemed to retain the weight of memories. Finn looked around, his eyes fixing on old boxes and decomposing furniture covered by a mantle of dust. The attic was filled with objects that were once loved, but now were just relics of a time that refused to be forgotten. With an impulse of curiosity, he approached a floorboard that seemed slightly displaced. As he crouched down, he noticed there was an empty space below it. Finn pulled the board, revealing a small, dusty diary with a worn leather cover and pages yellowed by time. Adrenaline rushed through his veins as he held the diary, the feeling of discovery mixing with a slight fear of what he might find. Sitting on the cold floor, he opened the diary carefully, feeling the rough texture of the pages under his fingers. The first lines were written in a childish handwriting, hesitant but full of emotion. Finn began to read aloud, his voice echoing in the silence of the attic, breaking the heavy atmosphere that surrounded him. "Today is my birthday. Mom said I can play in the garden after eating my cake. I hope Max doesn't come to bother me again," he read, the words painting a picture of happiness and innocence. As he continued, the tone of the writing began to change, the phrases becoming more distressing. "Looking through the window, I see shadows moving. I don't like the shadows. They look at me, and I feel that I'm not alone." With each word, the tension increased, and Finn felt the cold settle in his bones. He looked at the diary, as if expecting the pages to change their mind, but the story continued to unfold. The boy talked about an imaginary friend who became increasingly real, and how he began to feel that something was watching him, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. When he read aloud that the boy had decided to leave home to find his friend, a chill ran down his spine. "I'm going to find Max. He said I don't have to be afraid, but I feel that something bad is coming." The last phrase he read made his heart stop. I'm trapped here. I don't know how to get back. The shadows are calling me. The silence that followed was deafening. Finn looked around, eyes wide, feeling the oppressive presence of the house around him. He wondered if Ilara and Jasper would feel the same, if they too were being pulled into the dark clutches of that place. He raised his voice, calling them, "Ilara, Jasper, come here. You need to hear this." The urgency in his voice echoed in the attic, and in a few moments the two friends appeared on the stairs. Ilara, with a pale face, and Jasper, with a worried expression, approached, attracted by Finn's alarming tone. He held the diary, showing the yellowed pages and the words that seemed to become heavier and heavier in the air. "Listen to what I found," he said, his voice trembling. "This boy, he was afraid. He felt trapped. It's as if the house was alive and wouldn't let anyone leave." Ilara's gaze deepened, and she took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air. Jasper, in turn, shook his head, as if trying to push away an uncomfortable thought. "That's just a story, Finn. We can't let that scare us. We need to continue. We need to find out more about this house," he insisted, although his voice also betrayed a certain uneasiness. But as Finn read the last words of the diary, they could all feel how the atmosphere around them became heavier, as if the house was absorbing their emotions, feeding on their insecurities. The feeling of oppression grew, and for a brief moment, each of them found themselves trapped not only in the house, but also in their own fears, not knowing that the true battle was just beginning. The sound of a sudden crack echoed through the attic, causing the three friends to stop in their tracks, hearts racing in unison. Ilara, with wide eyes, turned to Finn and Jasper, the expression of expectation mixed with fear painted on her face. The atmosphere carried a palpable weight, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The diary was still open in their hands, the desperate words of the missing boy echoing in their minds. Hesitation hung in the air like a dense cloud, as they internally debated whether they should investigate the noise or retreat, seek the safety of the world outside. Finn, always the most skeptical of the group, shook his head, frustration evident in his gaze. He didn't want to believe that the house had anything to offer beyond ghost stories. It was just the wind, he said, trying to convince not only his friends, but himself. However, Ilara's restlessness was contagious. She felt there was something more, something that cried out to be discovered, and her curiosity urged her to move forward. "What if it's something important? We can't simply ignore it," she insisted, her voice trembling but determined. Jasper, who'd remained silent, observed his friends with a thoughtful look. He'd always been the dreamer, the one who believed in the magic hidden in the shadows. It was he who finally broke the impasse. "Let's go together. If something is there, we need to be together to face it. We can't let fear control us." With that, he headed toward the stairs leading to the attic, and Ilara followed him immediately, with Finn reluctantly trailing behind them, still fighting the feeling that they were getting into something that could be dangerous. As they climbed the creaking steps, light filtered through a small window, illuminating the space in an almost ethereal way. The attic was a place of forgotten memories, filled with dusty boxes and old toys. The scene was a contrast between the joy of a distant past and the sadness that permeated the environment. In the center of the attic, a collection of antique toys was arranged on a table. A wooden cart, a faded teddy bear, and a blue-eyed doll whose eyes seemed to follow their every movement. The feeling of sadness was almost palpable, as if the toys carried the memories of children's laughter now silenced. Ilara approached the table, her heart tightening as she touched the doll, feeling the coldness of the porcelain against her skin. There was something deeply sad about the way the toys were arranged, as if they were waiting for someone who would never return. Finn, in turn, observed the scene with renewed skepticism, although a small part of him began to wonder if there was something more there, something beyond just forgotten objects. "This is bizarre," Finn murmured, a touch of vulnerability in his voice. "Why would they all be here intact? It's as if no one had touched them for years." The uneasiness in his voice didn't go unnoticed, and Jasper, still absorbed in his thoughts, began to ponder what those toys might represent. For him, they were symbols of lost innocence, memories of a time when life was simple and full of joy. The trio fell silent, each absorbing the scene in their own way, feeling the sadness and nostalgia invade their hearts. The attic seemed to live, breathing with a weight of memories that accumulated on the walls. With each passing passing second, the feeling that something was about to happen grew, like an omen that hung over them. Ilara looked at her friends and on impulse decided to break the silence that enveloped them. "We need to discover the story behind all this," she said, determination in her tone. "These toys, this house, it all has a meaning." Finn hesitated, but Ilara's determination was contagious. He felt that there was something more there, something beyond just forgotten objects. "This is bizarre," he murmured, a touch of vulnerability in his voice. "Why would they all be here intact? It's as if no one had touched them for years." Modil. The uneasiness in his voice didn't go unnoticed, and Jasper, still absorbed in his thoughts, began to ponder what those toys might represent. For him, they were symbols of lost innocence, memories of a time when life was simple and full of joy. The atmosphere in the attic was becoming increasingly oppressive, as if the air was charged with a dark electricity. As Ilara, Finn and Jasper touched one of the old toys, a wooden doll with a painted smile that now seemed grotesque, the house seemed to react. The floor beneath their feet trembled slightly, as if the structure was alive. The sound of whispers echoed through the walls, indistinct voices that seemed to tell stories of pain and loss, creating a ghostly symphony that chilled the blood. Fear took hold of them, and each began to feel the pressure of the past weighing on their shoulders. Jasper, immersed in the strange sensation that enveloped him, began to lose his sense of what was real. He let himself be carried away by a wave of visions, flashes of a life that was not his, but that seemed so close. The face of a child, pale and sad, danced in his mind, and he saw moments of joy and sadness, laughter and tears, as if he were living the life of that missing boy. Innocent happiness mixed with loneliness, and he could feel the pain of one who never had the chance to grow up. Jasper's eyes became empty, a reflection of the despair that enveloped him, while the house seemed to feed him these visions, as if it wanted him to feel the same affliction. Ilara and Finn, noticing that something was wrong, tried to get Jasper's attention. "Jasper, come back! You're with us!" Their voices echoed, but he seemed distant, as if trapped in a deep trance. The expression on his face was one of terror and confusion, and they couldn't help but wonder what was happening inside their friend's mind. Finn, distressed, tried to shake Jasper, but his friend didn't respond. It was as if he had become a puppet in the hands of invisible forces, fighting against invisible chains that pulled him into an abyss of memories. The house, in turn, seemed to rejoice in Jasper's trance-like state. The whispers increased, forming a cacophony of voices that reverberated through the walls. Each sound seemed an attempt to communicate, to bring to light buried secrets that the three friends were not ready to face. Ilara felt her heart race in her chest. The feeling of claustrophobia increased, and she realized that the attic was becoming a place of imprisonment, where hopes and dreams turned into nightmares. "We need to get him out of here," Finn exclaimed, the urgency in his voice reflecting the growing tension in the environment. He looked around, desperate for a way to bring Jasper back, feeling that time was running out. "If we don't do something now, we might lose him forever." Ilara, with her mind still clear, grabbed Finn's hand, her determination growing. "Let's try again. Jasper, you need to hear our voices. We're here." She turned to her friend, her voice trembling but full of hope. "Jasper, come back to us. Don't let these whispers take you." But Jasper's struggle intensified, and he shook his head as if fighting against something invisible. The visions continued to unfold in his mind, showing moments that made him relive his own fears and insecurities. The missing child, with his sad gaze, seemed to be calling him, and he felt helpless, trapped between the desire to help and the terror of getting even more lost. The whispers became louder, forming a storm of voices that echoed in his brain. "Come, Jasper, join us. You're not alone." The house seemed to whisper, and he found himself fighting against the seduction of a distorted truth. The internal battle was fierce. The child needed help, but the house wanted him to become part of it. Ilara and Finn, realizing that time was running out, made a decision. "Let's pull him out!" Finn shouted, his voice resonating with determination. With a decisive movement, the two friends positioned themselves beside Jasper and together pulled him him firmly. "Jasper, come with us, now!" But as they struggled to rescue their friend, the house seemed to be preparing for something terrible, as if it was about to reveal the true nature of its secrets. The energy in the attic intensified, and the floor trembled more strongly, as if the structure itself was writhing in response to their desperation. The tension grew, and the air seemed to vibrate with the promise of a dark outcome. The atmosphere in the abandoned house had become oppressive, as if the walls were closing around Ilara and Finn. With Jasper in a catatonic state, the reality around them began to distort. Doors closed and opened without warning, revealing corridors that seemed to extend infinitely, like a tortuous labyrinth. The sound of the wind howling through broken windows merged with indistinct whispers, creating a symphony of horror that enveloped them. Ilara, with her heart racing, pulled Finn's hand as they traversed a corridor that became increasingly narrow. "We need to get out of here, Finn. We need to find Jasper," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. Finn, in turn, tried to stay calm, but desperation grew in his chest. He knew the house was feeding on fear, but what could he do? Each attempt to find an exit seemed to lead them deeper into the darkness, as if the house itself was alive, manipulating their movements. They came to a door that, when pushed, revealed a dark and dusty room. However, there was something different about that space. Shadows danced on the walls as if they had a will of their own. Ilara hesitated, but the need to find Jasper pushed her inside. "Jasper!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the oppressive silence. Finn followed her, but the feeling that they were being watched was undeniable. As they explored the room, the dim light of a flashlight illuminated a dusty mirror that stood out on the wall. Ilara approached, and upon looking at the reflection, a chill ran down her spine. What she saw was not just her own face, but a distorted version, marked by scars and tears. The insecurities she had always tried to hide were now exposed, and the reflected image seemed to mock her. "Finn, look at this," she said, panic beginning to take over. Finn approached, and upon looking at the mirror saw his own image, but this time he was an insecure boy with eyes full of doubt. The reflection confronted him with his failures, his lack of courage, and the idea that he would never be good enough. "What is this?" he murmured, feeling increasingly trapped in the web of illusions that the house created. The house seemed to be feeding on their fears, transforming their insecurities into invisible chains that imprisoned them. Ilara felt that each time they hesitated or let themselves be carried away by despair, the house strengthened, as if it were a predator delighting in the prey it had become. "We need to get away from this mirror," she shouted, pulling Finn away. But as soon as they moved away, a door closed behind them, locking them in that dark room. Desperate, they began to look for another exit, but each attempt seemed in vain. The labyrinth of the house was reorganizing itself, changing shape, becoming an endless prison. In the background, the echo of a childish laugh began to resonate, a sound that chilled Ilara and Finn's blood. It was as if the house was mocking them, as if it was enjoying their despair. "Jasper!" Ilara shouted again, her voice now mixed with the desperation growing inside her. "We need to find Jasper!" Finn nodded, eyes wide as he tried to focus. "Come on, we have to remember who we are, what we came here to do," he tried to encourage, but his voice sounded trembling and insecure. Finally, as they moved away from the mirror, a new door appeared before them, open like an invitation. Ilara, hesitant, looked at Finn, who took a deep breath and advanced. "Come on, we can't give up now." They crossed the door, and in doing so, the feeling of freedom they expected did not materialize. They found themselves back in the entrance hall, as if they had never left, the endless cycle of the house imprisoning them again. Reality became a nightmare, and the truth was clear. The real prison was not the house, but the fears and insecurities they carried within themselves. The house, with its shadows and echoes, had revealed what they feared. With hope fading, Ilara and Finn turned to the mirror again, and it was as if the walls of the house held them in a constraining embrace, showing that the fight they faced was not just against supernatural forces, but against the chains they had built in their own minds.